And we are back with the fifth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, we are going to be talking about a player who I feel like doesn't deserve to win the MVP. We're on year 1965. But before I begin, I do want to acknowledge Anthony in the chat. He says he mentioned he commented about how I commented about James Harden, having too much star power on Houston and how that didn't work. He said the issue with Harden, as an example, he's such a ball hog that him doing that hurts the team and he disappears way too much in the playoffs. I disagree with the first statement claiming that he's a ball hog, because you can't say that he's a ball hog when he's averaging as many assists as he does. And I understand what you mean by saying he's a ball hog, where he likes, to hold the ball for 24 seconds at times and take a really ridiculous shot. But it worked back then, so I couldn't really complain about it. And again, the assist numbers that he averaged, they were very, very good. But I do agree with the second part of your sentence where you're saying that he disappears way too much in the postseason. And that, I think, is actually the real reason why they were unable to even win a title with James Harden. The fact that he just disappears. Because for starters, if Chris Paul didn't get injured in 2018, and if the Houston Rockets didn't miss 27 straight threes, and if Golden State didn't have such a ridiculous, overpowered lineup every single year, James Harden would probably be in the finals. He probably would have. I genuinely think that in 2018, that would have been the year that he would have won the finals. Now, I think LeBron would have put up a great fight, but that was definitely his best chance of winning the finals. And really, the reason why they weren't able to do that, they weren't able to get all the way and get there, was because of not only just the teams falling short, but primarily Harden falling short as well. And that's happened, every single season. I can go on a whole tangent about James Harden collapsing in the postseason, because it happens a lot, but let's not do that. Instead, let's talk about Bill Russell, who Anthony in the chat already knows was the MVP of 1965. And this man is going to be featured a lot on this list. And again, before I go on another rant, Menenzo's in the chat again saying, in general, I don't think those Houston teams had enough talent to match up with Golden State. You can't just rely on James Harden, and I'm starting to think it wasn't his fault that he disappeared. And I mean, yeah, I understand, you can't just rely on one player and one player only, but they were one game away from doing it. They could have done it. They were one game away, and then Chris Paul got hurt. The entire scope of the NBA landscape, that everything could have changed. You have no idea. And the fact that they were just one game away shows that they had a legitimate shot. They had a chance. And aside from that, I digress. Let's continue with the MVP debate. So, before I begin, I just want to say that we are entering the territory of Bill Russell. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that Bill Russell has won several MVPs of his entire career. And a lot of those MVPs weren't deserved. Why? Because players voted for the award during his career. Now, that is very, very important, because that way you guys will know exactly why Bill Russell was able to win the MVP over all of these players that I'm going to mention. Now, I'm only going to mention this year in this example, and then the next time I do this segment, I'm going to bring up every single year where Bill Russell didn't deserve the MVP. Because the rules at the time stated, the fact that, players were voting for the MVPs, the rules at the time were that players weren't allowed to vote for themselves or a teammate. So naturally, they would give the biggest name on the best team their votes. And yes, winning determines value, but you also have to think about and look at the stats and exactly what they're producing. So the players, they voted, and this happens 4 times in Bill Russell's career. 4 times in 5 years, Bill Russell wins an MVP over somebody that I feel and that a lot of people feel is more deserving of the award due to a difference in team record. Because MVP, obviously, I say this all the time, most valuable player, you have to generate wins. The Celtics, back in this timeline, they were the most dominant team in the NBA. They were always winning. And it's like we joke about it all the time. Like, oh, they played against plumbers. They would always win. They would dominate every single team. And like the biggest reason why Bill Russell would win these MVPs is due to the difference in team record, because the Celtics were so good for so long. And Mananzo's in the chat saying, for me, based on the stats, the award should have gone to either Chamberlain or West, not Russell, but I can understand why they gave it to Russell because Austin won the championship that year. And I actually completely disagree with you on that statement with Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain did not deserve MVP this year. It was actually somebody else and like two other players that I think deserved the MVP over that. And Wilt is going to come up later. Like, don't worry, he's definitely going to come up later. But in this instance, like, he's definitely not gonna be a part on this list. Fern PG's in the chat. Hey Fern, how's it going? But no, Bill Russell, when he won his MVP in 1965, he averaged 14 points, 24 rebounds, and 5 assists on 44% shooting. Again, very good numbers. I'm not degrading the numbers. Like, those are great stats. However, the Big O, Oscar Robertson, he averaged 30, 9, and 12 on 48% shooting. And Jerry West was also another option for MVP, averaging 31, 6, and 5. So, like, their value and just their ability on the court and their ability to, like, play on the court and just the numbers that they've been able to produce. Now, there weren't, back in the day, there weren't as many stats that were tracked. It was just points, rebounds, and assists. So I can't really talk about, the steals and all that other stuff and all the other advanced stats. But Jerry West was leading the NBA in the advanced stats category with his 31, 6, and 5 averages. And so I really feel like if you were going to give anyone the MVP that year, it should have been either Oscar Robertson or Jerry West. And as I alluded to before on this previous podcast, right? This isn't the only MVP that Bill Russell has won where I feel like he didn't deserve to win the MVP. But if I were to talk about all of those, players that I think deserved MVP over him, we'd be here all day. So instead, what I'm actually going to do is for next week, I'm going to do a whole other segment where I just talk about specifically Bill Russell's MVPs and like in every single year where he won the MVP, where I think he shouldn't have, where I think it should have gone to somebody else. So every year before 1965, when Bill Russell won the MVP, I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to talk about the other players and the other who I feel deserve to win the MVP aside from Bill Russell. Because again, the biggest difference and the biggest reason why Bill Russell won the MVPs that he won was due to a difference in team record. Celtics were always the best, and the fact that players would vote for the MVP as opposed to anybody else. So, and before I end this off, Mananzo's in the chat saying, yeah, analytics wasn't really as prevalent back then, so we didn't know their defensive efficiency, offensive efficiency, or shooting percentage. And, obviously that makes conversations like this a little bit more difficult, but I mean, we know how good the Boston Celtics roster was. We know how loaded the team was. We know how good the team was. We know that Bill Russell was putting up these stats on a good team, a very, very good team. And these guys were putting up stats on much more mediocre teams. Now, obviously, team record is very important when you're looking at MVPs. But further down the line, as I go on with these players, you're going to see some ridiculous stat lines that feel like they deserve MVP, but they didn't win the MVP. And that's sort of where I think, the player voting came into effect. But aside from that, that's all I have for this podcast. And as I said before, The next time I do a segment like this, I'm going to be talking about all of Bill Russell's MVPs. So if you want to tune into that, then be sure to tune in. I'm probably going to do it Monday. I'm not entirely sure when I'm going to do it, but I might have it prepared for Monday. But aside from that, thank you for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, please remember to use the link displayed in the description, and as usual, please remember to use Super Chat if you want to get your comment or question noticed during the show. We love hearing from you guys, whether you guys have a hot take, something you've been dying to share, like something you've been wanting to say. We're all ears. You can use Super Chat, and you can send in your donations that way, and you can send in your chats that way. If you really want your chat to get featured on the show, then you can send in Super Chat, and it will definitely get featured next time on the show. And if Super Chat isn't really your thing, then you can always use the link in the description, gsmcpodcast.net, and send in your tips and donations that way, or your comments that way. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. That's all I have for you today on this final segment. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy football, because it's the first week of football that we get. First full weekend of football we're going to get, ladies and gentlemen. So enjoy that. And as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go